And welcome to another edition of the On Mission with Proclaim Cuba podcast. This show this year invites people to share stories of how they embrace Cuba. That's our theme for 2024. And as our guests share their roles of embracing the four pillars of ministry, it's evangelism, discipleship, training, and community support, we hope you will reflect on God's hand at work in the past, see His provision in the present, and visualize His transforming plan for the future. Today, we have a very unique opportunity to hear from an adventurous family of 5 who recently went to Cuba on their own. And I can't wait to hear how God led them to Cuba. And so we welcome to the show Marshall and Susanna Meringola. How are you guys?
Great. Thank you, Andrew, for having us.
We're excited to be here.
Wonderful to have you guys today. So I am very curious, and I'm sure our audience is as well. So we'll start with just a few things about your family, and tell us a little bit about your story and maybe even your church family, so you can throw it all in there.
All right. Yeah, so Susanna and I, we've been married for about 13 years.
Okay.
We have been in Austin, Texas, where we currently live, for about 10 of those years. All of our children, we have 3 of them, Hudson, Genevieve, and Grant, 10, 8, and 6, respectively. They were all born here in Austin, and they have kind of adopted our adventurous spirit and a love of travel. And so they all go. We go to a church in Austin called Austin Oaks Church, and we've been there for about the whole time we've been in Austin, and have really been blessed through our small group. We have wonderful couples that we've kind of journeyed through life with over these past 10 years or so, raising kids together, serving together. Susanna and I are very active in our children's ministry and our marriage ministry at church. Just so thankful for the body of Christ here in Austin, and for the opportunity to serve together with them and to live life together. So
Wonderful.
We're just thankful to be on the podcast today.
Yeah, that's great. So we're thankful. You know, you are one of 2 calls that I've had with people who have gone to Cuba on their own. Another one is Cheryl, who's actually in Cuba right now, working with the children's ministry. We have a new initiative to launch these Saturday schools across the country. And so we're very excited to be able to connect her heart. She just is wonderful. So, hopefully you guys will have a place there too. So, so I'm always curious too, is like, what, you had no idea who Proclaim Cuba was or anything. You actually found me kind of before you went, but you kind of reached out to me before then. So what was it that moved you to be interested in Cuba and to take your whole family there?
It's a great question. You know how God uses interesting things? Well, in our case, He kind of used a Southwest sale. There was a good Southwest sale of 50% off, and we both have a very big sense of adventure, and so we saw this good sale, and I was like, Marshall, what do you think about Cuba? And he said to me, well, if you call your dad and he thinks it's a good idea, then you can go. And my dad's a pastor and has been to 50 countries. So I call him, and that says, it's a fantastic idea. And then we booked it. And then a couple days later, you got to finish the story about what happened a couple days later.
So a couple days later, I subscribed to another podcast, the Daily Article podcast with Jim Dennison.
Absolutely.
And so I was listening on there, and they made some reference to another podcast that they do, the Dennison Forum podcast, and they were interviewing Pastor Carlos Alamino, and I think father and son. And they were talking about Proclaim Cuba, and we had literally just booked probably 2 days before. Okay. And we were talking to one another and saying, there's got to be an opportunity for us to connect with and understand what the needs are down in Cuba, and how can we best support, not make it about going to the beach, although the beaches are beautiful down there.
Very nice.
And not just about going and experiencing just Cuba for ourselves, but also to figure out ways that we could serve and be used by the Lord in supporting people down there.
Great.
And so that's what prompted me to look on the website and reach out to you, Andrew, and you were so helpful in getting us plugged in and getting some information about the needs, and then ultimately getting plugged into a local church down there, which we were just so thrilled to worship with them on a Sunday morning. That was just the highlight of our trip.
Yeah, that's really wonderful that you were able to do that, and I'm of course happy to always help anybody who's interested. You know, it's been 20 years since I went for my first time, and so I certainly can appreciate the desire to want to figure out what's the best way to help and what can you do while you're there and things like that. So I think it was really God ordained that we were able to help you to once you were there to maybe meet some of our pastors and actually go to the service. I thought that was so wonderful that you were able to worship with them that Sunday. So I know you also you went there just from a cultural standpoint. There's a jazz festival, I think, was what you guys were interested in. Has music been a big part of your life?
Oh yeah, we love live music. We live in Austin, so one of our favorite things to do is to go to live music here in Austin.
Thanks.
And then actually our flight down, we connected with a jazz musician that was from St. Louis.
Oh, cool.
And we had known we were planning to attend the jazz festival, and we connected. And he said, "You've got to come to this particular show I'll be playing." So we took our 3 kids on one of the nights to the jazz festival at one of the old buildings there, and we enter. And we were like, "How much is admission?" And she counted, kids are free, and it was 5 cents for each of us to go.
Oh my goodness!
We paid 10 cents for a whole family to go.
At first, there was a language barrier. She was saying something in Spanish. I know some Spanish, but certainly not enough to really get by that well. But I thought at first I was like, this can't be what she's saying, because it's.
Right.
I mean, it's nothing. And so, and lo and behold, and thankfully, it was as inexpensive. But it was interesting because most of the people there, I mean, it was open to anybody, presumably. But when I commented to a few locals that we connected with, I mean, they don't have extra money to be spending on a jazz concert, right? I mean, so that's I realized quickly that what I perceived to be, wow, what a great deal. I mean, it's almost like, why would you spend money when you got to use your money for food and necessities, not luxury? So, but it was a wonderful, I mean, really beautiful concert hall venue that we were at, and wonderful music. Kids loved it. We loved it. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And, you know, that is one of the things about, you know, we don't talk a lot about culture on this podcast, but we really do try to emphasize that is an important part of their life. And it has always been that part. Many talented musicians, many talented people within the arts. The last time I was there, one of our pastors, his wife, his first wife passed away from cancer, and so his second wife has a daughter who's a ballerina, and she dances professionally as a ballerina, and so we got to go to a performance of that, and that was the first time I'd seen that too. So that was really
that's so cool,
really incredible, and they have a wonderful art scene, and so being able to participate in things like that, especially music, is a big deal. Right. So
yes, it was great.
That's really amazing how you were drawn to Cuba. You saw the flights and the fact that you can go, and you know there's all kinds of different ways that you can go. How did you guys feel as you started? I know we had those interactions, Marshall, just about what can I take or what can I bring that would be helpful, and so was there some anxiousness about going, or was that pretty smooth sailing for you guys?
Yeah, I would say so. Susanna is much more go with the flow and like, hey, we'll figure it out. I'm more of a planner, and so I was very anxious, excited but anxious about and we've done other international travel with the kids, but it was one of those things where I didn't know. You don't know what you don't know, and I didn't know a lot of people who had been there, and so I didn't have examples to go by. And thankfully talking with you, and then also we did connect with someone who was recommended to us to help plan some different things during the day and to get a guide while we were down there. And she was very helpful in getting us kind of thinking about like planning out our days and planning places to stay. That was another thing. I understood that, depending on where you're from and from the United States, there are certain like limitations, like credit cards, you can't use those. Certain places you can't stay at. And so, and then we weren't sure about Airbnbs. And so there were a lot of those types of questions logistically that created some anxiety on my part, not so much with Susanna, but overall, I mean, it was one of those where we were super excited to get down there and to experience a culture and an island that, I read about in history books and didn't know anyone who had been there before. So it was exciting on that front, kind of a new frontier.
Yeah, there's a great deal of history, and I've had to learn it over the years. Primarily the things we hear a lot about are things within the Castro regime, which has been, they were celebrating their 65th anniversary of the revolution this year.
Wow.
And so it's been a long time that they've been under the oppression of that, and you can feel it taking its toll down there among the people. They've had over 500,000 people leave since 2021. And you are feeling it within their culture, because some of that is actually intellectual property, people who are teachers, people who are parts of the university system or the training system. So they're feeling it there. They're feeling that cultural loss within their own people. And then obviously as they move to different parts of the world as well, that there's pressure in those places as well. So it kind of creates that crisis in many locations. And so you feel it. You hear it in their voices. They're not happy about that either. So, so maybe the winds of change are blowing. So all right. Well, tell us about the trip. Paint a picture for us as you walk outside of the airport and you take those first breaths of the tropical air, and there you are in Havana. So
it was remarkable. It was like going to another planet in a little bit of ways, because there's nothing, it's just so different.
Right. And
the best part was we brought our 10, 8, and 7-year-olds. So we got to watch it through their eyes.
Yes.
We stayed at an Airbnb, which I didn't really know you could do, but you can. Yeah. We stayed at, and Airbnb came recommended to us, but we stayed in Havana. And it was, like going back in time and seeing all of the old things. A big focus of our trip, we kept saying, is to our kids, is this a relational trip? We want it to be relational, and as in our family, we want it to be relational with the Cuban people.
Yeah.
And that's how we framed the whole trip. So we want to make an opportunity to make inroads with people. Our middle child, Genevieve, she's 8, and she made about 50 bracelets and brought them down and just was like handing them out to people.
Yep.
And what we saw initially was just so many people outside their homes in the streets, interactive, very friendly, very kind, wanting to get to know who we were. Very, very hospitable people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure having kids with you is kind of a unique experience, just because people love, obviously Cubans have wonderful families. And so I'm sure that was something that really drew people to you. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And they're all blonde. So
our kids are all blonde.
So they all stood out. Everyone touched their heads. I said, I kind of warned them. I've been to, I was like, touch your heads.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because there's one thing to say like, oh, we want it to be a relational trip, but it's another thing to actually have that happen. And I was blown away from the get-go. We got to the airport and we had a little bit of trouble tracking down the person who was supposed to pick us up, and the people who were there just standing around, seeing that we were a bit out of sorts and maybe struggling to figure out what to do next. Yeah. Kind of just, they came up and they were just so kind and talking with us and offering their phones and offering to call and talk to people on the phone. And then when we finally got to our Airbnb, as Susanna mentioned, seeing the people in the streets, and we stayed in kind of the old town of Havana, and everyone was outside, and it's very communal. And even though we had there was a language barrier, everyone was just so patient with us, and they spoke in Spanish, we spoke in broken Spanish, and we got along just fine, and just very, very impressed by how hospitable and giving and kind people were. They don't have much, but what they have, whether it's just a smile or a welcome or just some casual conversation, they offered that to us, which was great.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting you said your kids are blonde head. I've been amazed sometimes, there is a heavy European influence as well that has happened down through the ages as well. So sometimes you'll be in communities and there is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed little girl sitting there,
Mhm.
and you're like, wow, kind of interesting how the gene pool works, right?
Yes.
So,
Right, right.
but it is surprising sometimes because your expectations can be kind of different and surprising. I like things like that. I think that's fun.
Yeah.
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 All right. So you guys are in Havana, and what was the first thing you guys did while you were there? After you got to
We
your
did.
hotel?
Once we got to our hotel, we did a little bit of a tour of the old town, and we had a guy who helped show us around a little bit, and
Okay.
he had so much history. He was probably in his 50s, and so he just could go way back. And he just shared with us a lot about the city. We walked around, and he showed us a lot of the city.
Yeah.
And then we did, of course, we did the classic car ride, which was very cool, to drive around the city.
Yeah.
He was also very transparent about the issues in Cuba, which we really appreciated. We liked that it didn't feel like kind of a government-sponsored tourism thing. He was very transparent about his experience.
Good. Yeah.
And we really liked that. And then we actually ate a lot in kind of Havana. We'd go to different restaurants. You can kind of tell when a local owns a restaurant. They're usually much more, trying to get you to the restaurant, whereas a government-controlled restaurant. So we did a lot of just eating locally there and wandering some of the markets.
Did you have any food that you hadn't really seen before or tried?
We tried a ton of local. We ate a lot of seafood.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah, a lot of really good Cuban food.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it was it was a very So the ropa vieja was one that I had never had before. That was very good. I actually had a couple of servings of that at different restaurants while we were there.
Sounds very famous. Yep.
Yeah,
and I will say that the back to what Susanna was saying about our guide. I mean, he may help make our trip what it was, because I feel like I might have been, because we went there kind of on our own, but having someone who could guide us and give us context for what we're seeing and take us to spots, important spots that are historically important for the Cuban people. We kind of overlooked the city. We saw some of the cathedrals and other things that had been there for a number of years, and then, as Susanna was saying, the context or the transparency and the honesty with which our guide helped us kind of process what we were seeing in the current situation down there was very, very helpful for us.
That's good. It's nice. I think the people are more aware now of things that are going on in the world, and obviously their own struggles that they're dealing with. So I think they they'd like to express and share stories just like we do. I think that's why this podcast is important, for people to be able to share the stories of what they've been drawn to do. And so I think it's no different in Cuba. People want to tell their stories. So was there anything that was surprising as you guys got there? Was there something that was surprising to you or your kids? I mean, like you said, you were living through their eyes, which I think is wonderful, because kids will just say anything, especially the ages that you guys have. So,
I think for us, what was so surprising is how economically devastating it is right now down there. I knew it was going to be challenging, but I mean, it felt like there's borderline almost malnutrition in terms of, most people said they're eating only 1 or 2 meals a day now down there, just with how little money they have. And so that was shocking. I kind of had I've been to a lot of third world countries, but the inability to make additional money there is devastating. So you'd see people just scrounging together what they could, but then also the kindness of like the even with nothing, like the pastor at the church we went to afterwards, we got to have coffee with him and his wife.
Oh, good. And
they made this best cup of coffee I've ever had. And then at the end they said, can we give one to your driver too? And you just know, like, that goes so far there. They can't afford anything. And they brought coffee in a little cup to the driver that drove us back to our house. And you just saw the kindness even in just total economic disparity.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is exactly right. Is that you do see that kindness, and you see that need. One of the things that we as a ministry are recognizing is just so important to do the community. We talked about the four pillars at the very beginning, but the community support element for us on the medical supplies that we're bringing in, and now we're even bringing in food. Like, for instance, this last trip that I took last week, we added powdered milk to the bags that we're bringing, because we do food bags when we're there. We create food bags to be taken out to people who are in need, and we give those to the pastors so that they can give those to people within their congregations. But that was the first time that I had done that. But we added some whole powdered milk just so that it would have calories to it. But it's things like that that will. It's a small drop in a very large bucket of need, right? But it is important for the people that receive it. We're also bringing in formula for kids, and we have a partner called Mission Regan, and I always like to plug them as much as I can, because they just provide us all of the medical supplies, all of the baby formula, as much as we can take. And we brought 900 pounds of medical supplies and medications and this powdered milk on this last trip. And those are the kinds of things that we really use the folks who go, so that they can be a part of providing those things that are so very hard to acquire there, and yet are a lifeline to the people. So we're able to provide help in that way, but also the hope that we're able to share also after the help, after we've met the need, and we're able to share the hope of Christ, and that impact goes together. God really uses that to draw people to himself. They says somebody cares, right? Somebody wants to hear my story. Somebody wants to pray with me. And who are these people? Because I'm just in a world of harshness and no kindness at all. So kindness speaks volumes, right? In our culture, in their culture, and anywhere right now, kindness is a huge thing. So, and those are wonderful things to be surprised about, right? Can you be surprised by kindness? I think that's a great thing. So, so do you feel God used you on that trip in any specific way?
Yeah, I would say even before our trip, and Andrew, after you had given us some recommendations of things to bring, we reached out to our friends. We started with our small group, and then we kind of branched out, and we even involved some of our friends who are unchurched, who don't have a relationship with Jesus, and they were just excited to give. And I think everyone wants the opportunity to participate in something that helps other people who are in need. And we were just overwhelmed with the support and generosity of people here before we left, that we filled up 2 suitcases full of clothes and other supplies, medical supplies, some food items, and we were able to take those down there, and we delivered them on that Sunday morning to Pastor Yovanis and Yaima. And we're just really thankful that we were able to do that. And after the fact, they actually distributed a lot of the children's clothes and some of the other resources that were in those suitcases. We're able to distribute those to, I guess they have some children's activities on Saturday mornings in the neighborhood.
That's
and
the
so they sent us,
I was talking about.
That's exactly it. So they sent us some videos and photos of kids who were wearing our kids' former clothes and other clothes that we had brought down, and
that's cool.
And it was just really really great to see, and it makes you just think about all the material blessings we have here in the United States, and I think for our kids and for us, created a greater sense of gratitude. We obviously didn't control where we were born, when we were born, all of these things that we just take for granted that are just gifts to us. Just by God, and nothing that we've done to deserve any of that. And so out of that abundance, kind of being able to give to others who maybe aren't as fortunate materially. So that was really, really great.
Yep. Being able to exercise your generosity muscles is always a good thing. It really is. So, and you guys talked about Cuba being unique, because it truly is. We talk about that all the time. It's just a place you do feel like you go back in time, and it's just a very unique place in the world. So you guys feel you're any different as a result of connecting in Cuba now, and maybe even a desire to go back?
I've been to a lot of places, and Cuba, I was like, I want to come back here. And I think partly it was because of the relational piece.
Yeah.
We had such an amazing experience going to the church that y'all partner with down there. I mean, we went down there and you just get greeted and you walk in and it was so vibrant. And the day before they had one of those Saturday children's events. And so a lot of the kids were there the next day. And then we sang the goodness of God in Spanish. And I'm like, that's a song we sing here. And to sing it with Cuban brothers and sisters in Christ was just like, that was so touching. So you feel like I came back here with that heart pang for my brothers and sisters in Cuba, and just knowing how to pray for them and how amazing organizations like yours are who partner with them, because it's crazy. It's almost like feeding the 5,000, like a little goes so far and so long and so big in Cuba, the way that churches there can use the resources of Americans to just spread God's love throughout the community. And it's incredible. So there's like this connection now, this like heart pain connection with people of Cuba. And we talk about it and the people we met there all the time. We do with our kids, we do together. I think it was like Marshall and I said, it was one of the best parenting decisions we kind of accidentally made. It was like the Southwest sale that led us to go to Cuba was one of the best parenting decisions we've made.
So you get to thank Southwest and God for creating a sale. So,
God, how God works in unique ways.
Right.
Yes.
So, well, good. Obviously, if we can ever be a part of making that happen, or if you bring a group, we can help coordinate that all as well to do even some more help in Cuba. We'd love to be a part of that with you guys, and we encourage everybody if you're listening to this podcast, maybe you don't know us either, feel free to reach out just like Marshall did, and we're happy to help make that a reality for you. So as we kind of wrap up here, is there anything that that you guys can think of that you might want to encourage others to say to others, to encourage them to maybe make some of those steps? Not everybody's as adventurous as maybe you guys are. So, perhaps that's something that you could encourage others to go and do.
Yeah. I would say, I think we're all called as followers of Jesus to step out of our comfort zone a little bit. Or maybe more than a little bit, and it's hard. It really is to, and Susanna's more adventurous than me. I'm a little bit adventurous, but there are certainly, things that were, felt a little bit uncomfortable for me at first. But at no time, did I ever, and still to this day, I mean, this, as Susanna said, this is one of the best decisions I think we've made as parents, to expose our children to a new culture, to a different experience, and I would strongly encourage anyone who has a heart for seeing the gospel presented to people and to help people in need, to consider going to Cuba. I mean, there are plenty of places in the world that need Jesus and need material resources, but Cuba, I mean, it's just such a convenient flight. There's really very few barriers in terms of travel barriers to get there. It's a little bit more complicated, some additional visas and whatnot, but nothing that you can't handle. And I encourage anyone to check that out and to reach out to Proclaim Cuba. I mean, you guys were awesome in putting us in touch with the church down there and giving us some guidance, really kind of taking away the uncertainty that we initially had.
Well, and I always tell our kids, but I told them this whole trip is like, sometimes when the problems feel so big, look eye level. Like there's so many, and you feel that when you go to Cuba. It's like the problems feel so big, but then you get to meet the pastor and his family, or you get to hold hands in church with a Cuban lady that you'll get to see again in heaven. And you're like, let's just look eye level. Let's look, when it's so big, you can do a relational trip where you can look eye level at them. And so the problems don't feel as big that way.
Absolutely. That's so great. You guys are awesome. We look forward to being able to continue our ministry. God has been so blessed. He's expanding it to, he's connected us with so many people like yourself. So, the more we can let people know, we have a Cuba coffee hour that we do. You can use that to have us come down and make some coffee for you. Remember that best cup of coffee you made? Well,
Yeah, that's right.
I can bring Carlos and he can make that for you and actually show you how to make it, because that's pretty cool too. There's actually a whole process. People don't know, but there's really a process to making Cuban coffee. That's why it's so good. So it involves a lot of sugar. So, that's always a problem also for some people, but the coffee sure is good. I don't drink coffee except when I'm in Cuba. I drink it when I'm in Cuba. So maybe it's in those little cups. So those
little cups, right? Exactly.
Cafecita. Yeah. So I love those. Those are great. So, well, good. Thank you guys for sharing your experience with us. If anybody ever wants to connect with us, we're just at proclaimcuba.org. We have all of our events listed on there, and then we have our Passport to Cuba event coming up September the 7th in Dallas as well. So if anybody wants information about those can be found under the events section of our website. So thank you guys for, again, sharing your story. We look forward to perhaps other opportunities for you to be on to share other stories about going down to Cuba. So until then, thank you all again, and God bless you till we're on our next program. All right. Dios te bendiga.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.